I'm going to tell you, I've been listening to a lot of student talks. You two are awesome. I mean, that's honestly the best two we've had. I think at the same time. Uh, Rachel, do you go around in town like that, or just here? Okay. Yeah. Well, brilliant minds think alike. There we go. Uh, no, we've got Bill Price with us. This is really cool. They contacted me. I remember voting for him in 1990 for governor, uh, and I think we made a bad choice in the way we that thing turned out. Uh, Bill lost. Okay, that's my point. But I wish he had won. He's going to talk to us about corruption in government. He is a Oklahoma Cassidy grad, Georgetown University undergrad, law degree from OU. So, Bill, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm impressed with the enthusiasm and numbers here in Stillwater. This is the largest club I remember speaking before. Uh, Michael Hightower wrote this book. It was the public corruption in Oklahoma. And it's 4 decades of corruption in Oklahoma, which was enough to fill this very thick book. Michael is from Oklahoma City originally, but he lives in Virginia, so he's been scheduling me to speak. And the backdrop, my biography is really a backdrop of both in high school, I was involved in uh, uncovering some of the corruption, and then most of it was as assistant U.S. attorney and U.S. attorney for 15 years, and then in private practice. And you can't believe how corrupt Oklahoma was at the time we started. Uh, One of the county commissioner case is only one of the cases. 230 county commissioners were convicted. It's still the largest political corruption case in American history. And it was true not just Oklahoma, but most of the country. And it was in every area. And by the end of this presentation, especially if you buy the book, uh, and Michael Hightower will kill me if I don't sell a bunch of books because he's trying to sell them all. I don't get a cent from it to go on to paperback. And so he's trying to sell out of the books. And we'll offer those at the end. By the end of the presentation, especially if you buy the book, understand the scope of the corruption, how widespread it was, how it worked so well, how good people were corrupted, how it was discovered, and how it was prevented in the future. How to prevent it in the future. Uh, when I was 16, I drove G.T. Blankenship's bus around the state. And G.T. Blankenship, for those that don't remember him, he was running for AG at the time, and he helped uncover a Supreme Court scandal in which a majority of the Supreme Court was taking bribes. If you can imagine that, you kind of expected that of the legislature, but not of the Supreme Court. And every interview of local interview would ask, how is it that the feds end up uncovering corruption and the state doesn't? And he would say the same thing. In the Constitution of the state, They have a provision for a multi-county grand jury, but it's never been implemented. And that was one of the results of the county commissioner case, is that we finally implemented the multi-county grand jury. And you will see how important that was. Let me go on to the Supreme Court scandal, and then the Speaker of the House, J.D. McCarty. Speaker of the House in Oklahoma is really more powerful than the governor. Definitely J.D. McCarty was. This was a book about the Supreme Court scandal. This was Al Snipes, not to be confused with the infamous Prince of Darkness. He was a county chairman that had no money. He didn't even have a candidate. All he had was, in the most Democratic district in Oklahoma, he had J.D. McCarty was the representative. And it was the poorest district in Oklahoma. It had only about 10% turnout in a typical election. So what he did is had our Teenage Republican Club, which I was chairman of, call this district and ask if there's any Republicans they actually liked. And they found the Vondell Smith, who was deacon of a church. He was totally unknowledgeable about politics. He was speaking to our Teenage Republican Club, and they asked him about right to work, and he leaned down to me and said, "Are we for it or against it?" But he was the ideal candidate to run against J.D. McCarty. His signs on his funeral home were throughout the district. So he had no money, he had no candidate, and we called every voter in the district and just asked him one question: do you like J.D. McCarty or not? And there was a surprising number that didn't like him. And we would tell them about Vondell Smith. If they liked him, we said goodbye. And then we turned out those people that didn't like him, and we defeated him in the most Democratic district in Oklahoma with no money. And he was 2 years later convicted of tax evasion. He was getting huge amounts of cash from all the special interest and passing it out to the legislature. And that was the source of his power. Next was the U.S. Attorney's Office. I started in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and my first case was Governor David Hall. It wasn't because I was so good, it's because I didn't have any cases that I wrote the briefs and participated in the trial as fourth chair. I have to explain to the students here who in the devil is David Hall. He was governor of Oklahoma. He was so charismatic that he was rumored to be a vice presidential candidate, and he was totally corrupt. And that case involved a guy named John Rogers, who was Secretary of State. And David Hall had an offer to take a bribe of $50,000 for a pension fund out of Texas. And he had to offer it, half of it, to John Rogers in order to get it past this pension fund. John Rogers went to the FBI. Now, in the fall of David Hall, the book by Burkett, I 90% agree with Burkett on most of the facts. But one fact I differ on him is that he viewed John Rogers as honest. And I viewed as previously corrupt, but had married in the last year a very religious woman that had him straight. And I base this on, I was in the back of the room when they were interviewing John Rogers, and his wife next to him nudged him and said in a soft voice, "If you don't tell the whole truth, I'm leaving you." And that told me a lot about the motivation of John Rogers. And John Rogers went wired against David Hall and caused his downfall. So in the book, you will read about a much shorter synopsis of the trial and the fall of David Hall, which was a packed courtroom at the time. J. Howard Edmondson is relevant in that he was considered kind of the John F. Kennedy of Oklahoma. He was a Democrat, but he was very honest. And he took a Scanlon report in 1958 that said there was widespread corruption in the county governments. And he sought to reform it, and he was totally destroyed by the county commissioners. They were by far more powerful than the governor. And he never passed any legislation after that. Never. And so, anyway, what happened is, let me tell you a little bit about how the corruption was performed. It was very ingenious, and it was not only in Oklahoma, but throughout the country it was done the same way. If I'm a county supplier and you're a county commissioner, 50% of the material sold to counties since statehood did not exist. They were called blue sky deals. And the other half were 10% kickbacks that cost the county 40% on the middlemen. So it had a devastating effect on rural roads in Oklahoma. So how did it occur? You had a problem selling non-existent materials in a number of ways. One was if the FBI came by and asked, where did you buy it, you wouldn't have an answer. And number two, your tax problem is that you get from the county, let's say a $10,000 check for non-existent material, and you divide it 50-50 with the county commissioner, you end up in your tax bracket is making almost nothing. So you had to have a phony backup invoice supplier, somebody that looked like they were buying it from you or for you, and you would write a check to them and they would kick back the money minus a fee for supplying the phony backup invoice. And this was true everywhere. And the methodology of the 231 county commissioners, only 5 to 10 were honest, or that we could verify were honest. And one of them was here in Payne County. The women would be especially proud that it was a woman. Karen K. Mullendore, that was one of the few honest county commissioners. But why was it so prevalent? You begin to, if you were a county commissioner, you begin to watch everybody being corrupt and getting away with it. You begin to feel like a sucker for not taking it. And even though it was the oath of a county commissioner not take any money, they end up violating their oath of office again and again. Stevens County had a grand jury. I might get a little bit of water or iced tea. Iced tea is fine. And Stevens County was like a lot of counties. We later heard them all talking about all the county grand juries that they had lied at. And they had all gone out and lied and gotten away with it. You had in Stevens County 3 times the number of lumber to rebuild every bridge in Stevens County 1 year. But with this system, you had all 13 suppliers had proof of where they bought it from, and they'd even have a, let's say, a box of nails that actually was delivered, and they would get somebody in the yard to sign for that, and then they'd add $10,000 worth of lumber that didn't exist. And so a week later, the person in the yard wouldn't remember whether it was received or not, so they'd have proof that it was delivered. So it was really a wise system. And Charles Muse, that was one of the auditors and inspectors that was really honest, came to me and the FBI and said, "We've given up. All 13 suppliers have come in and lied. All the county commissioners have lied, but we can't prove a single instance of non-existent materials." Unbeknownst to us, they had all chipped in $1,000 apiece for one of the phony invoice suppliers, Dorothy Griffin, to hire Gene Stipe as their attorney. And so she had, in the key to the case wasn't in Stevens County, it was in her tax records in Atoka. And that's the key to a multi-county grand jury, the ability to go after people in other counties and prove the crime. We tried everything. We tried a undercover company that they figured out immediately. And later on, it was great because they'd talk about the undercover FBI company and how they had avoided it all along. But we weren't getting anywhere until a random event. I was at an arson investigation in Oklahoma City, and I had an IRS agent come up to me and talk about the case, unrelated to this. And he accidentally said the Opal Hester name rather than Opal Gibson, who was the witness in that case. And I recognized immediately that he must be working county commissioners. And because of the Nixon problem, the IRS couldn't communicate with the U.S. attorney, even the assistant handling those areas during this time. But we could communicate to them. And I recognized that he must be working county commissioners. And if he took the checks that the FBI had cashed for Dorothy Griffin throughout southeastern Oklahoma and compared them to the tax return, there would be a variance. And if there was a variance, you could bring her up to the Oklahoma City, and I could get the Attorney General of the United States, that was the only person that could authorize a joint grand jury investigation, which there was a free flow of information. And so they went out to Dorothy Griffin's farm and she dug up $1.8 million worth of phony invoices buried in her barn, and took them to Oklahoma City. She passed it. We had her pass it to the IRS, pass it back to her to pass it to the FBI, and the FBI to take pictures of it and pass it back to the IRS. So that's the way we got around the rules back then. But what to utilize her on? Because for 2 years the investigation had been occurring in Stevens County, and they had dropped her like a hot potato. But we figured out a technique that would elicit the right kind of conversation. And it was to phony up IRS civil. We didn't want to scare them too much, rather than criminal investigation. And we made it somewhere close to the amount that they paid to Gene Stipe. We made it like $13,000. And her pitch to them was, on these phony materials, you got half and the commissioner got half, and I only got 10%. You ought to be, you need to reimburse me for this civil amount. And all 13 did. And she did 160 tapes. And we even sent her to commissioners that she'd never met. And she'd come in and say, I'm Dorothy Griffin, I'm the phony invoice supplier for X supplier. If the FBI comes around, you don't know the name of my son or the color of his trucks. And it said it was delivered by him. And half of them would scribble that down and say they would relay that to the FBI. And so eventually we got to the end of Dorothy Griffin, and then we had to choose which of the 13 suppliers to try to approach. And we did a psychological analysis for like 3 weeks of the tapes. If they went with their family rather than to fishing with their son, that was a plus. If they went fishing with a fellow county commissioner, that was a minus. And we determined that Guy Moore loved his family more than his fellow commissioners and suppliers. And we picked Guy Moore. If we picked any other, we would have been dead right there. Moore did 180 tapes for us. And I'm shortening the investigation. We had a D-Day, which 100 IRS criminal agents and FBI agents went out to interview commissioners, and we'd let them all lie, and then we'd play the tape, and then we had a form plea agreement from me to plead to one count that would include all their activities. And that was the beginning of the unraveling of this case. We had a whole bunch of county commissioner resignations. It was the nation's largest kickback scandal. Even Doonesbury wrote something about it. And this is
Oklahomans tonight can say farewell to Oak Scam.
Much
U.S. Attorney
younger
Bill
me.
Price says the massive 4-year investigation of county commissioner corruption is over. What had been described as the largest public corruption case in U.S. history led to 230 guilty pleas or convictions.
Attorney Bill Price says the probe was significant for a number of reasons, but the U.S. prosecutor says the most important aspect of the investigation is the amount of money taxpayers are now saving.
That there's been tremendous price reductions as a result of these prosecutions.
Price says the cost of equipment purchased by those counties has dropped as much as 42% for some items in the years since the Oak Scam probe began.
You know, Oklahoma ranks tops in the amount of corruption as far as state government goes, according to all the reports that we've had so far. and people would like to see us get to second place.
A primary reason for the prosecution of political corruption is deterrence of future political corruption in this state.
Members of Common Cause joined together today to honor a man who waged a legal battle for a good cause. During a reception today at the Ramada Inn West, local members of Common Cause awarded U.S. Attorney Bill Price the Common Cause Award. They gave him the honor because of his part in the prosecution of county commissioners and kickback scandal.
You can look at it from the point of view of a black eye to the state of Oklahoma, or you can look at it from the point of view of a good work for the state in that we're one of the few states in the country that has hopefully cleaned up this kind of corruption, and I think that is a much more positive way to look at it.
Price told the group that about 50% of the other states have similar corruption problems. He adds that Oklahoma is a leader in this type prosecution.
As we mentioned, the multi-county grand jury was finally passed that I heard about as a teenager. The one thing that we did not pass that we need to keep an eye out, and I'm not saying the corruption is back yet, but it will fade over time, is home rule and a county manager system. It was interesting when we interview suppliers in northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas. They'd say it's kind of like a visible line, and 95% of their business in Oklahoma was corrupt, and 95% of their business in Kansas was honest. And the reason why is they had a county manager system, kind of like we have in our cities, in which part-time county commissioners would appoint a county manager. And typically, a county manager would have a road engineering degree and be a lot more professional. And also, there's check and balance to that system in that they could look at the county manager and hire or fire him. There's also efficiencies in that instead of 3 county yards, you had 1 county yard. It's much more efficient, and I'm hoping that we will finally get it in Oklahoma. I testified before a committee in which there was 100 county commissioners lining the room, and they all didn't like the idea of losing their full-time job and their full-time salary. It wasn't that they were dishonest. It was that the forces are there to keep them from doing it. There's a number of stories in these books. They're really fascinating. One story is that on Dorothy Griffin, there was a guy named, FBI agent named Jim Elroy, and he was from Shawnee, Oklahoma, as was one of the suppliers. And he'd run into the supplier pumping gas as he was going out of town. And he decided to raise to him that he loved being an FBI agent because they had listening devices that could listen on the window, through the window of hotels, and listen to what is going on. That supplier was meeting with Dorothy Griffin that day, and the supplier named Klutz, believe it or not, he said immediately to Dorothy, "Don't go near the window. Jim Elroy may hear it. And let's go to the bathroom." And they stood there in the shower with her tape recording on her. Anyway.
I am sure, Mr. Price, that we've got a couple of questions. Can you take a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Who has questions? Maybe just more stories. Maybe buy the book.
Yes.
Question from Jeremiah.
I found this profoundly interesting. I'm really appreciative that you're here today. I'm asking this question. There's a reason I'm asking this question. I'm not saying this for campaign purposes, but this is the reason why I'm asking it. I'm running for district attorney, and one of the promises that I've made is that I will fry a public official who violates the public trust. My question for you is, you hear quite often that prison doesn't serve as a deterrent for people. I disagree with that, particularly for public officials. Do you feel like that kind of a hard line and putting people that are public officials in the penitentiary that violate the public trust actually works and helps to prevent corruption?
I think it works. Obviously, they don't need to be on white-collar crime in for a long time. A typical county commissioner that lied got incredible sentences, but ones that cooperated and repented, so to speak, got 6 months in prison. And it was symbolic of going to prison is the way to deter it. Absolutely. And the DAs weren't necessarily culpable. They had no way of proving this crime. And only by doing the steps that we did were we able to uncover it.
Who else has a question? Anybody? All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Price, for your presentation and your work.